So hi, everybody, and welcome to this February webinar. I'm Gal, co-founder CEO at Base. Nice to see everybody on this session. We also have here Nitzan from Base, but we have our two co-hosts, Nick, Bennett, and Kalina, Bryant. They'll introduce themselves in a minute, or maybe you can both say hi now.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
So our webinar today is about how you can basically become a champion. We even have a slide for that. Where's that one? Let me share my screen, sorry. So what Kalina and Nick will take us through is their framework of how they built their own kind of personal brand, how they became, we can call them champions, and whether it's using your customer marketing superpowers to unlock career paths, or just using your personal superpowers, not necessarily customer marketing superpowers, to unlock career paths. That's part of what we want to talk about in this session. Nick and Kalina present two very different, I think, journeys and career paths, but they're both influencer in our community, and we thought that it's even more appropriate today as we announce the top 100 of 2022. Kind of would be great to hear both of them, who are of course on the top 100 list, to share how they built kind of their activities around personal branding. What does it take from them in sense of effort? What are some best practices that they've seen, and so on. And that's kind of what we want to cover today. Before we dive in, just a couple of words. So first of all, we just announcing top 100 influencers today. Super excited about that. Secondly, I want to say that in general, Base is very active in whatever we can do around supporting the community and making all of you champions. So we have the CLG campus, the Customer-Led Growth Campus. We have workshops. Kalina did a workshop on launching a world-class cab. We have different sessions there, courses, podcasts with people like BT, Luis Gonzalez, and many others. So I really recommend that you join us there and learn more about the practice and build your career. Base, in 2 words, is like a customer marketing designated platform that helps you engage your existing customer base, leverage the platform within CRM so sellers can find references, advocacy, and whatnot, track attribution, and build the whole motion around customer-led growth, giving customers a new experience with loyalty and advocacy engagement, and helping you achieve amazing rewards, and your internal teams, whether it's marketing, sellers, or CS, see the customer journey, engage customers, nominate, request references, and so on and so forth. And with that, I'll move the mic to the team here. So Kalina and Nick, do you want to introduce yourselves a bit more and start talking a little bit about what you plan to share with everybody?
Yeah, sure. Nick, do you want to start off, or you want me to start off?
You can start off, yeah.
All right, cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Kalina, Kalina Bryant. I've been in the industry, believe it or not, it'll be 10 years, 2024. So today we're going to talk to you about building your personal brand and leveraging each stage of your career, and making sure that you could be able to capitalize on that, but also take ownership of it, storytelling, really understanding how to present yourself on social media based on your wins that you're doing within your current role, whether that's customer marketing or community building, lifecycle marketing. We're going to be here to really just give you the honest layout that worked well, at least on my end, what worked well for me in the past few years, all the way from going to different public traded companies. I'm on, I think, the 3rd IPO now, Forbes 30 Under 30. And so I'll be working with you all, just showcasing how I built my brand from scratch.
Awesome. I feel like it's kind of hard to match that, but hey, everyone, I'm Nick. So I run event-led growth and evangelism at Airmeet, but I have been a big advocate of personal brand building for years. I've been creating content for 3 years now on social media. Have really started at nothing 3 years ago, and have almost 50,000 followers now on LinkedIn, as well across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. So big into that. Honestly, it's been a catapult for my career, both from a professional standpoint and a personal standpoint. I've been able to create some really awesome projects, been able to launch a merch line myself, as well as some really other cool things. So excited to be here, excited to talk with all of you and hopefully have some fun.
Merch line, Nick. I might need to pick your brain on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's new, but it's going really well. It was I came up with the tagline, haters hate, creators create, because again, putting people first instead of a company first mindset is so important. And honestly, it just took off. It's funny, people send me pictures all the time of like them wearing stuff, and I just think it's so cool to see.
Mic drop. I think we need some animation golf, some
Yeah,
co-partners.
I love it. I'm going to adopt the haters hate, creators create.
Cool.
I'll get a hat or a t-shirt. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, you both prepared some stuff that you want to share with people. So maybe Kalina, you can kind of kick us off with what you want to share, and then Nick, you'll do that. And again, encouraging everybody to ask questions as we go. And we'll have also left time for questions at the end, but just as Kalina goes and then later as Nick goes, just, ask them anything.
Yeah. So me and Nick, we did some slides last week to just sort of give some structure. So like Gal said, it'd be very collaborative, but I figure, Nick, we can just sort of talk towards each slide and then open it up for questions and maybe some personal storytelling. Again, it's more so workshop style. Like we're going to be obviously the educators showing you what worked well for us. But again, this is your playbook. You're able to kind of sketch out what you want to do going forward. Our hopes is after this meeting, you sort of have a mind map as to what you want to do, at least for the next 2 quarters to build your brand. And then again, Nick and I are also inside the CLG campus. So if you have follow-up questions for us, we're more than happy to take that offline. Cool. So I think the best way to start off is sort of an interactive assignment. I think this works well because before you start posting and building your reputation and understanding like who you want to be known as, you have to do some soul searching. I would say I write out every single thing that I'm thinking about of how I want to be seen, because once it's out there, I think you should know it's out there. Once you start Googling your name, that one article that you did 5 years ago, it's still there. So just making sure that you're happy with what you see. In order to do that, it takes some time to think about what reputation, what's the niche that you want to be known for, and what category you want to be known for. So I'll just kind of start off with how I work through this and then pass it over to you, Nick, and then we can do some Q&A. But reputation-wise, I always sat back and asked myself, I identify as an African-American woman, usually the only person in the tech world, in my particular role, starting off in sales, being the only one on the sales floor. So in that side of things, I could either have a positive reputation saying, hey, I'm killing it, I'm learning how to do everything I need to do without, step by step, or I could have walked away because it was difficult. So I thought about how can I be innovative? How can I be unapologetic, which is the name of my company? But long-term, how can I make it regardless of what's going on in the industry? So that was what I was thinking about, being female, being badass, but also being very calculated in everything I was doing. Niche-wise, being in a sales role, but then wanting to pivot, at that time, I think that was like 2014, I was at Marketo. Great opportunity from a sales side. It was a booming company at that time too. But the thing was, we didn't have customer marketing yet. We had customer account management where there was a place for you to renew your contracts with customers. And then there was the sales side. So on my end, I had the marketing hat, but also the sales hat. And then also selfishly, I started realizing at Marketo, if you were there probably like 2 years before IPO, you would probably be set up to have a very successful management or director role. So I started looking at, number one, what's my niche? So I knew I could like engage with customers and people and build a good relationship. And the second piece was I knew how to pick companies. I knew if I picked a unicorn company that was doing amazing things, if I did it, right when they were at like Series D, I would be able to experience another IPO and be a part of the game by developing something interesting. So I started looking at just customer marketing roles. That led me to taking a role at Anaplan, which was a perfect timing. It was probably like 3 years before they IPO'd. So that was a really great opportunity to develop a niche, but also to put a name for myself. And then category wise, I think it's really important. I play around with all three of these: marketing, revenue, and customer success. I truly do believe from a customer marketing perspective, you have an ability to make this your own. I've sat in all three departments and they all work well. I think it's just really important to see how you want to turn that narrative. When I was in marketing, I always looked at a growth marketing strategy, figuring out how to tie in content and how to really take the stories and the customers and bring them to life. From a revenue perspective, I only started building programs that tied into actually closing deals. So that's why the reference programs is so important in the executive briefing and CABs. But I had to figure out how to tie in the importance of our role. As you guys know, like the further you go, people know the value of customer marketing when it's working, but sometimes it's really hard to showcase how much revenue you're bringing in. So I always think it's great to sit inside the revenue department and also have products such as Base, because they're able to show the attributions and show how you're actually influencing the bottom line. And then from a customer success perspective, that's all the way from the bottom of, customer engagement. Why do we do what we do? Without customers, there would be no company. So figuring out what category you want to stand with. Again, this can constantly change, but I think that it's important to pick a certain category that you feel strong about as you're developing your brand, so people can start to associate yourself with the reputation, the niche, and the category. So I think it's important to really just sit down and think about what makes you honestly the GOAT long term if you're going to be in this industry. And personally for me, I'm Black and I'm outspoken. So I'm just going to be the GOAT because I know everybody's always talking mess about me. So let me make sure the stuff is actually really good. From a niche perspective, I realized no one could do some of the customer marketing stuff I was doing. And then from a category perspective, just being bold and being able to touch marketing, revenue, and customer success, it's a game changer. So you need to understand what's going to make you the game changer. I'll pass it to you, Nick.
Yeah, that was good. That was, it's interesting because I feel like reputation and kind of what do you want to be, perceived versus personal brand is what do you want others to think about you? I think because I've thought about this a lot. I think that they're different, but they're the same in some regards. And so for me, I've been a traditional field marketer for, 10 or 11 years for tech companies. And that's really what my focus was. And so I was in Laguna Beach. I remember this. I was in Laguna Beach and I was working for a company called Clary at the time. And my boss was Kyle Coleman, very well-known person on LinkedIn. And we were at our revenue kickoff and he was like, hey, you should talk about field marketing on LinkedIn. No one else does. And at the time, there was 650 million users. And I was the only one that was talking about it on a consistent basis, what it is, how it actually impacts a revenue organization, how it's more than just events, and how it actually plays across the entire buyer's journey and actually even, sales as well as CS. And so I started talking about that, which eventually evolved into, ABM for me. Last year, it molded into a little bit of customer marketing as I took on that role for the first time at my previous company. And then I really kind of doubled down on the evangelism and creator-led growth kind of standpoint. I'm a big proponent of people first mentality over creator first. Over company first. And if you can change your mindset when it comes to your go-to-market strategy and put everything from a people, what does that actually mean? So if you're sending a company email, it should come from a person. If you're developing an ebook, there should be an author. There should be a person attached to that. If you get reviews on a website, you should have a person, an actual person, replying to these. We're building out something right now, a sub-brand of Airmeet called the Airmeet Creator Studio. And what it is we're building think of it as an art studio for creators to come together and kind of collaborate on projects. It has nothing to do with our product or anything, but we believe in a people first mentality when it comes to your go to market. And we know that people buy from people. And so for me, my reputation and kind of what I've been known for, my niche and what I've really focused on has really changed over the last 3 years. talk as much. I mean, I still talk about marketing a little bit, but I don't talk about it as much. I definitely focus on the evangelism and creator first approach right now. But I think it's still incredibly important when it comes to where do you want to be associated. People still associate me across revenue organizations, marketing. I still jump on customer calls and prospect calls on a regular basis because the prospect specifically asked to meet with me. And that's, again, it's your reputation that goes along with it. So it's nice to be able to say, hey, I'm going to go check out this product because I know Nick works there, or I know Gal works there. Like, people associate the brand with the people that actually work there. And if you could have people that are creating content around this and, focusing on specific areas, it just makes it that much more, I guess, the brand that much more appealing. So that's kind of been my journey. Again, I very, like, I niche down like really, really hard. Like, I think it was extremely important. And it's funny because now 3 years later, no one still talks about what field marketing is on a consistent basis. And I still think it's incredibly important to these organizations. And I know the pandemic's kind of like shifted things around multiple times, but field marketers will always be important to your business and playing a bigger part of your revenue organization.
So I think the first thing you're both saying here is, which is great, is like, choose your niche, choose what you want to talk about, what you're going to be known for, and double down on that, because it's probably hard, to talk about everything and be an expert in everything and also create a branding, and everything. But the other thing that you're not saying, but kind of, I think, is a subtext of everything you're saying, is that you're investing a lot of time in it. You both have a day job. This is not your job. You're not Kim Kardashian doing only this. So, I mean, you have your day job. Being an influencer in B2B is a bit different. You come from the practice and you're talking about things that resonate to you and you become experts at. But you're also investing quite a lot of time in building some kind of plan around building your personal brand. And I guess an interesting question is, how do you do that? Do you plan on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis what you want to do on your personal brand as well? Do you set, in stone time for doing those activities? Like, if I want to start tomorrow, be an influencer and reach 40, 50,000 followers like you, Nick, or Kalina, be on 30 under 30 in Forbes, that won't happen. I'm past 30 by now, but anyway, like, what would you do then? How can they start this?
I can jump in. I mean, for me, it's more so it's the consistency of showing up every day. And showing up means something different to every single person. That doesn't mean that you have to jump in and just start creating content, but there's probably like-minded people, whether you're a customer marketer, whether you're a field marketer or whatever, that you want to learn from. And they're probably already creating content if it's some of the bigger names that people are used to. So all I would say is, hey, show up on their content every single day and add something insightful. It's not just dropping an emoji or something like that on LinkedIn. It's taking the topic that they've talked about for that specific day and adding something of value, something that people will say, wow, who is this person? Go click their profile. You're going to organically start to build a base back to your own profile without even having to create content. And if you can do that every single day on, say, 10 to 15 different people, yeah, it's going to be a lot if you have a regular job on top of it, but you have to make the time for this. And I talk to a lot of CEOs and founders where I help them do ghostwriting because they understand the value of this, but they were like, I'm an executive at a company. I can't spend my time on LinkedIn, even knowing they know how important it is. So it's surprising how many executives hire ghostwriters to create their content on LinkedIn because they know that the personal brand is incredibly important. They know that it's going to benefit their brand and their company in the long term. And they know it's going to actually impact revenue, growth, and retention, but they just can't fully commit to it. And I think it's understanding of like, hey, if you can't do this right now, there's resources out there, but you have to show up and you have to show up consistently. And if you show up for, say, 2 months and then you fall off for, say, 8 months, you're going to be back at square one. You have to figure out what showing up means to you and like do that deep level of thinking of what you actually want that to mean, and then just, execute on it and set goals for yourself and figure out, hey, this is where I want to be 6 months from now, or this is where I want to be a year from now. And follower count isn't everything. There's lots of people that have huge follower counts that have hacked their way to get to those follower counts. It's engagement level. If you can, again, create an engagement level where people want to chime in on your content and chime in on the conversation and take those conversations to DMs, that's where the actual growth is going to happen as well, at least in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with that, Nick. I would also say I made sure I had 2 platforms. So in 2020, I launched the podcast, and then recently this year, I launched the newsletter. And so it was accountability, honestly, for me. When I did the podcast, it was a way for me to connect with other thought leaders that I admired. Instead of just cold emailing them, I wanted to have something to offer them. So it was like, hey, I've been seeing what you're doing in the industry, would love to amplify your voice. And so those were individuals that were VP, C-level, had become very successful entrepreneurs, authors. And in reality, I thought, well, why would you give me 30 minutes of your time? I personally see LinkedIn messages come to me and their sales pitches where people are like, let's have a coffee chat. I don't answer them because I don't know what our coffee chat will be about. And I don't understand why I'm going to give you that time. So I wanted to make sure I didn't have that thought process run through potential people, in their heads. So when I did the podcast, I figured it's a platform that you can, make your own, but also it would be a platform that someone would be proud to be on. So now my podcast, it's still invite only, and there's plenty of people that are waiting on the list, figuring out I wish I can be on the podcast, but I made sure that it was intimate, but also made sure I was very structured on who I was reaching out to, and making sure that it was more elite and I think hard to obtain. I think that's one thing when I think about when I'm representing content or pushing certain things out or putting my name and associating it with certain brands, I make sure that I'm going to be okay with that long term, and I'm figuring out how can this better the long term journey of the branding. So that was one thing. So I always ask myself, what is it that you have time to do? I know when I did the podcast, at first I wanted to be a blogger, but I didn't know if I had enough time and resources to write all the time. But I knew that I could record, probably 5 different episodes in a week, but then that could technically be a month worth of content. And there was opportunity for me to get introductions to other people. So I would say the podcast worked for me. I think that you have to ask yourself what works for you. I got over the fact that I had to hear my voice. I got over the fact that I was going to be, visually, seen in different places. So that was okay for me. But you have to ask yourself, if you're not someone that wants to be, vocally heard all the time, but you love writing, that might be your field. I still love writing, but I made sure probably 2 years later that became my niche. But I also made sure that the podcast was strong enough to where I would have enough content to have enough resources to post. And I also wanted to have a certain platform. So now I currently write for Forbes as a contributor, but with those pieces of content, I make sure that they're super structured and I understand when they're coming out. And it's now on a bigger platform that now gets to amplify and bring things back to Unapologetic. And so with that thought process, it's been probably about 2 years in the making of figuring out how does each step need to go. So with the podcast, just getting sponsorship on that, you have to be able to go back to the numbers, right? And go back to what you're going to be presenting to people if you want the credibility. And I think that if we tie it all the way back into your niche, when you're thinking about customer marketing, your credibility is being able to get customers to say yes. And your credibility is being able to get individuals to go do speaking engagements for you and do testimonials, do reports for you. So if you really love that, I would ask yourself, how do you build that for you personally? Even Nick having his own merchandise, his own e-commerce store, right? Technically for customer marketing, you have swag, right? Every Christmas, you're rolling out holiday gifting. If you're doing awards, you're figuring out what type of gift goes along with that award. So I would go back and always ask yourself, if you don't have that much time, let's say you have 2 to 3 hours in your week to dedicate to your free time, what's something that's not going to be draining? What's something that if I give this 3 hours at 9 p.m., it's going to give you a little bit of energy to turn that laptop back on. And I think that that's the key to being successful with your brand, because you can't just walk away from it for weeks at a time, and you can't just say, hey, this isn't for me. I'm gonna not do this for probably 2 months. You have to personally like your content. I go through this all the time where one post that I put on LinkedIn might get 200 views or 200 likes and reposts. And then the next one, there may only be 4 likes. But if I enjoy the content, you never know, like the individual that only liked it 4 times, those are the people that are reaching out on the DMs that really admire what you just said. Those are your true followers. But if you're scared about not, always hitting 100+ likes, you need to think about, why don't you want to do that content, or why is that content something that you truly believe in? And that goes back to the reputation, right? I think that if you're going to be consistent in this game, you have to be okay with what's being put out there, regardless if somebody is giving you a compliment on it or not.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in too, because you bring up a good point about the podcast. So I had a podcast that I ran for 2 years called Rep Your Brand. And so it was very similar, where it was all about, it was for B2B marketers that wanted to build a personal brand. And so it was, it was more showcasing stories from people that have done this, and like how it can open doors that you never thought were possible. And again, like no one wants to, unfortunately, with all the layoffs that are happening in tech today, people are losing jobs left and right. But those people with personal brands, the people that are known for specific niches or whatever, it's like, you're going to have an easier time finding a job. And the people that are out there and putting themselves out there and showcasing how their mind works, how they attack specific problems. Like when I'm interviewing people, like I'm taking that into consideration versus a resume, to be honest with you. Like I'm going to look at, like, first thing I do for anyone that applies to a job is I go check out their LinkedIn profile, and I check if they create content already. And if so, what's that content about? How does their mind actually work? And so then I shortlist people basically on that criteria over just, a resume that some people, can lie and all sorts of things there. But the podcast ran for 2 years and it was fantastic. And I had 45 episodes that I released of like truly incredible people that just, again, showcased how this actually works, how their brand has got them to just a whole new level. And it's allowed me to then just use my own brand to start a new podcast. And it's again, now it's for marketers specifically, but it's anonymous questions from B2B marketers that maybe they don't feel comfortable asking. And for me, the content that has come from this and the amount of support from marketers that listen to it, I mean, I've only released like 4 episodes so far. We're getting about 3,000 listens per episode, which is crazy for only being 4 episodes in. And it's just allowed me to catapult and get sponsors for the show now and support it to a whole new level. So I think it's definitely important to have that piece too.
Cool. We have a question from Jody basically asking about, is LinkedIn the main platform for people should focus on, or would you kind of see a trend going towards maybe TikTok, Instagram, and so on? What do you think about those? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, so for me, I'll give you my exact, like what I actually do. So writing a post on LinkedIn is fairly easy for me. I can write it in about 5 minutes and hit post. I am using the schedule feature now just because of how much stuff I have going on. So I know it every morning at 8 a.m. my time and 7 p.m. my time, Monday to Thursday, I'll have a post go out, and then one on Friday morning. And so I have all that pre-written on Sunday night, scheduled it out. And then what will happen is I will take that post or those 2 posts for the day, and I will record a video of me basically just repeating that and maybe adding on a specific point around it. And then I will distribute that onto TikTok. I will then use that same video on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. And so it allows me to basically just take one kind of asset and kind of distribute it across a lot of different channels.
I agree. I would say I'm not that process oriented, Nick. Might have to follow that process. But I would say I always start off with LinkedIn, and I also determine I have 2 different audiences on Instagram versus LinkedIn. So I personally, when I'm thinking about my B2B world and the industry of just being associated with tech and how to build companies and customer engagement, I strongly, heavily rely on LinkedIn. But when I think about Instagram, I think about my other personal brand of like the thinking about Forbes, thinking about the travel, thinking about me as just an individual. Those things are separate, right? So let's say I'm doing a fancy photo shoot in Tulum. I'm not going to post the photo shoot on LinkedIn, but that's a reel that I will create on Instagram. So the audiences are different. I personally, me and TikTok, I think I'm still a little bit old school, but I know I probably have to get into it. I think that is awesome if you have the time. I would say personally, whatever I see is doing the best on LinkedIn, I try to figure out how to repurpose that in some other way. But again, like thinking about, I try to just look at my processes when it comes to my newsletter and my podcast. Those are, constantly going up with reviews and engagement. So I try to make sure I'm consistent there. And then thinking about all the other partnerships that I'm working on, how can I pull them all together to where the newsletter and the podcast are moments of truth. And then also I have the community for Unapologetech. So I'm always trying to figure out how do we pull in resources for individuals to join inside the community and actually have the true dialogue. But I think it's also, it goes back to what do you want to get out of it? Personally, for me, sometimes I don't know if I want to have a lot of followers. I would prefer having like sometimes a smaller niche because I know who I'm talking to. And sometimes those come with better deals, better opportunities, and better sponsors. And it allows me to be very structured with my content compared to if I have 100,000 people. I don't know if you're truly following me because of like the content and the expertise that I have, or if it's just, a bot, a robot. So for me personally, I'm always more quality over quantity sometimes. Of course, if it goes bigger throughout the years, that's great. But at least I know from, a revenue perspective and also like from an engagement perspective, I can feel very strong when I'm going to pitch for new sponsorships or when I'm talking about the stats and like pulling in those juicy quotes. Sometimes if I need a testimonial, I can directly reach out to my audience and I know that it's going to be an authentic testimonial coming back to me and not something very generic. So I think that that's something to ask yourself, right? Because you can totally have thousands and thousands of followers, but if no one's actually like listening to the podcast or like reading the newsletter, looking at the open rates, I don't really know like what that number means, So I would say ask yourself that and figure out like how you want to keep, I think, pursuing things. I think Gal, you said this to me probably like 2 years ago. I had did the first customer marketing like webinar on like how to build your brand. And it was great. We had people that registered and attended and I got tired. I was like, oh, this is a lot of work. And he says, Kalina, you can't do something just one time. And I remember when he said that to me, I just looked at you and I was like, I got to work a lot now then if I want to keep it going. But that was like 2 years ago, so you do need to be very clear on when you post something or when you start to make your name for yourself. It's a lifetime journey now. You've basically signed up. You're your own boss when you're an influencer, right? So if you don't want to go to work, you don't have to go to work. If you don't want to post, you don't have to, but just know that you're not growing either if you don't do something. So have people like all kind of up your butt, telling you that was a great post, but when's the next one coming or when's the next piece? It's important.
Cool. I know you have another slide up for everybody.
I think this one might be one of my favorite slides. Full transparency. This has been a slide that I've been using for probably like 5 years now in my presentations when I'm pitching for new jobs. I've changed it to where it's like branding for your career development, but in reality, this is actually the diagram that I use for customer advocacy and customer marketing of how you engage step by step with your programs and how they tie into kind of the dollar signs for the company, brand awareness, storytelling. But I think it's nice because I always look at this as your baseline, and as you kind of constantly go up, you're constantly achieving. Either you have like certain programs that are fully fleshed out, you have buy-in, you have resources, et cetera. But today we're going to use this as a career development maturity model. And so what you have here is like understanding your expertise. Once you understand your expertise, understanding how to position yourself. Once you know how to position yourself, figuring out how you want to be the evangelist. Do you want to have it be a podcast? Do you want to have it be a newsletter? Do you want to have it be a training platform, whatever it might be, like just figuring out how you want to brand yourself. Do you want to be on more webinars? Do you have a company that you admire? product that you admire, can you associate yourselves with them so you can start to build that brand up? And then next would be amplification. Once you start to understand your webinars and how your engagements is going, then you can kind of get to that process of amplification and understanding your rhythm. Similar to Nick, how he understands exactly what he's going to post every Sunday night, like being able to thoughtfully write that out is such a good piece of amplification and consistency. And I think once you get to that point, that's when you're kind of looking at yourself as a thought leader, because you have a rhythm as to what you stand for, what you post, and then your audience kind of is expecting, content from you. They're kind of excited for it, honestly. But I think it's important to don't try to be the thought leader without doing all of these pieces first. It's important. I think that's why I kind of did this diagram, because it's almost like going from crawling to trying to run without, doing all the other steps. And so this sometimes takes some time, but I would say, when you're thinking about your expertise, some people are really great at content. I think that doing storytelling, right, and customer marketing, many people probably a few years ago, they thought customer marketers were just individuals that wrote case studies. I definitely disagree with that. But if that is the case where you do love writing content and you do love doing those stories, that might be your expertise. But the thing is, you need to notify that so you can understand how you want to position yourself. I think about a good friend of mine, Kevin, he's a big thing with the awards, and that's his niche. He sticks consistently with that niche. He knows how to build them from scratch. He knows how to scale them. He's now doing courses on it, all the way from different webinars. But if you think about it, he decided to have that as his expertise. And then from there, he started positioning himself as being the thought leader, as the best at designing award programs. And then now he's doing the courses. And I would say he was on a lot of different webinars, probably the last year or two. And his social is now only tied around kind of the customer marketing journey and bringing up all of the different programs that he was able to launch during his time at Marketo. And then now he's actually fully producing those courses. That's become his layout. It doesn't have to work that way. I think personally for me, I'm more of an entrepreneur layout. I have multiple hats where I'm always going to be involved in the tech industry. I think that the tech world feeds a lot of the content that I want to build. So I have more of an advisor hat or more of a senior leadership hat, making sure that companies can find success. So that's been my expertise, but that's also how I position things going forward. So if you think about the podcast, there's only thought leaders and senior individuals that can talk about how they're able to scale companies or their own business. And then when you think about branding, I'm very particular of how I'm posting things. It's a lot of career development. And there's a lot of structure of how to actually brand yourself long-term and associate yourself with different partnerships and be that big time advisor. And I would say amplification wise, I strongly lean on kind of the newsletter, but making sure that everything is educational. So for me, I'm a strong believer in, if you don't have education, you don't know where you're going, right? So it's how can you be an expert if you don't have a mentor, if you don't have someone giving you the 5 basic steps? So when you think about my posting, it's all about how to be the best you can be from an educational perspective. I'm a true believer that once it's in your head, no one can take it away from you. Knowledge is power. And that's been the layout for me when it comes to thought leadership. Nick, I'd be curious to see how you think about the triangle.
Yeah, no, I love this. And I think, one thing that you touched on, I think is super important is so many people try to skip the middle steps here. So many people want that overnight hack. I just want the glory of it all, of being able to do the events and speak at stuff and get all these awards. And if you're not putting in the work, it's just like anything, like a marketing program. If you're not going to put in the work, but you expect the results, you're not going to get it. You have to understand there's a process and there's steps to be able to get to the next piece. And if you're skipping steps, you're going to, you're not going to hit some of the things. And then you're going to wonder why, wow, I got dropped back to the first piece here. And so for me, it just goes back to from the expertise standpoint, I'm trying to provide value. And the best way that I feel like I can provide value, and this was something that it's honestly some of the best content that I enjoy personally, is around when people share programs that they're working on and they're talking about successes and failures, and not enough people talk about failures. That's another thing. So many people paint this world as a beautiful place and that everything is magical. But that's not the case. And that's not the world that we live in. And I think it's okay to talk about failures. And again, if you're talking about failures, what are some of the lessons that you've learned from those failures that you can then share with others so that as a marketer, maybe I see a program that you ran and you just didn't have success with it, and I was thinking of running something similar. Now I know what to avoid. And maybe we have a very similar industry, similar company profile, things like that. So it just helps me. And some people don't want to talk about those things. I talk about successes and failures in the programs that we're running. And I'm actually writing one soon around conversational ads for LinkedIn. I've ran this in the past at previous companies, had tremendous success. I ran this recently in the last couple of weeks, someone to meet with me personally one-on-one to our ICP accounts that were in kind of later stage deals, and no one took me up on it. And so again, like that was a failure, but there was lessons learned in the way that LinkedIn in the algorithm processes sponsored ads now has changed over what it was even a year ago. So again, like if you can share your expertise and just programs that you're learning and just continue to build off that, I think that's important. It's some of the best content out there. And now for me, like I really want to, and I know evangelism is here from like a branding standpoint. For me, I want to kind of be that thought leader around like the evangelism piece, because you have so many people, and I think of people like Sangram, and I think of people like Ethan Butte from BombBomb and like others, where even you could throw Chris Walker from Refine Labs in here. These are executives at companies. They should be evangelists. And Gal, you know, you're another example of this too. But what about the up and comers and employees at your company that take on these types of roles? And I think that there's incredible people that have the buy-in, they have the social awareness already. So it's not only the executives that maybe are promoting themselves or promoting what they're working on, but you're amplifying as a company everything. And I'll give you a good example. I usually get about 1 million views on my content just on LinkedIn every single month right now. Now, if you can amplify that and you have, say, 10, 15, 30 employees that are also sharing their thoughts on programs and things, it doesn't just have to be marketing, across the entire function. Think about that. All of a sudden, you're driving, say, 20, 30, 50 million views per year on your content organically at zero cost. I'll take that over ad spend all day. And I think it's just getting people with the mindset that, it's okay to think about this, and it's okay to go back to like that people first mindset versus like, companies just promoting stuff from their company handles. Like, I don't know. I don't really follow any company handles. Like they post stuff and it's usually webinars or other stuff, but there's not always a ton of value. But the people that post content from those brands, that's where the true value is for me. And I just think it goes back to like employee advocacy and things like that. But tying it all together, like I want to help be the face for what it looks like for non-executives to create evangelist type roles in MarTech and sales tech. I think IT, I've worked for IT companies in the past where they've always had a developer advocate or those types of roles. But in MarTech and sales tech, it's a newer thing. And I think you're going to see in 2023, more companies start to either build out these roles, and these aren't readily available. You can't just go on LinkedIn and search evangelists for a MarTech role, but the companies that understand it and get it and understand how this is actually going to be a moving the needle factor, those are going to be the companies that win.
And I want to touch a little bit about being a thought leader, because again, you don't necessarily have to be the number one person in the domain, and again, have tens and tens of followers. Like Kalina said, she focuses maybe on quality more than on quantity. And one of the things that we need to understand is when you become being a thought leader could also be being a thought leader in your own company. And maybe some of the people here should kind of start with that. And when we talk about the top 100, same thing. These are many times thought leaders in our industry, but they probably also created some kind of recognition to their work within their own companies. And I think that's where to start. So think about it. If you start posting on social, what your customers do, right? Let's maybe hone in on customer marketing specifically. So if you start posting on social what your customers are doing, the results they've seen with your brand, right? So people in your company will see that you're doing that and telling that story. If you maybe send an internal email or a Slack message with some customer success stories and great things that happened, with customers this month, this quarter, whatnot, you're starting to spread the word of your work. You're starting to become a thought leader in the sense that people would say, okay, this person is connected to our customers. They know what they're doing. They know what their challenges are. They know what they love and what they, need us to improve on. And more teams, whether it's sales, customer success, product teams, management, will start coming to you as the expert, but also as kind of the thought leader on that. So I think when we think about becoming thought leaders, evangelists, we need to kind of maybe start from a place that we feel super comfortable with, like evangelizing our work and our, our customers. What some people would evangelize, would internalize it and evangelize their work. Others might externalize it and evangelize their, their customers' work or their customer success. But in both cases, the subcontext is that you're evangelizing what you're doing internally. And then if you start doing it also on social, do it externally, more customers would connect to you, grow your network. More people in the industry would connect to you, you grow your network. More questions would come up with that, and you'll have more content. So it's also some kind of work in progress. You don't have to start, with kind of saying, hey, I want to, have the number of followers on Twitter that Elon Musk has. It's like there's a way there. It's more important, like how do you want to define your thought leadership journey for 2023, right? And take that on.
I agree. I know we have about 10 more minutes left. I think I had another slide. This was more so pitching. I think this goes into detail what you were just saying, Gal, of leveraging your company and the company brand. And so this slide is really designed of like how you want to pitch your expertise and receiving the buy-in. So, I'm not sure what stage everyone is in their career, but I know every time I was starting off a little bit more in a junior role, I would take one particular program. One was honestly starting off with the reference program that I didn't actually understand how important a reference program was until I needed buy-in. Because that was the program that was helping bring in all these different deals. But I was able to get buy-in and credibility from C-levels, from the CMO at that time. And that allowed me flexibility to be on more webinars. The bigger your company, sometimes you have to go through certain approvals for you to be able to externally vocalize your expertise. But I would say part of your pitch is when you are doing well with your program, figuring out how to get a senior individual that can pitch or I guess vouch for you when you want to do those external talks. And then also long-term for me, customer advisory boards became a humongous part of my success. But again, that allowed me to get in touch with the CEO of every company that I was working with. And that allowed me the freedom to be able to be seen as an external facing person. And so maybe you're not ready to, go out on your own or like be your own full-time influencer. It's a lot of work. And also, that's kind of costly. I don't know if you have to go that route. I would say if you start off with your strategy on a pitching layout for your internal company, especially if you're working at a certain company, that means you respect their brand, you respect what you're doing there, you respect your job. So I would say figuring out how to showcase your programs to the right individual so you can become sort of their spokesperson in a positive way, right? You figuring out how you want to be seen externally for all the women out there, depending on what months are coming up, it's a perfect opportunity for you to be the face of your company at times and talk about the success that you're bringing to the company through customer marketing. If you're thinking about fireside chats, regardless of who you identify as, but as a customer marketer, instead of just pulling in the customer and giving that fireside chat to someone else, you can start saying like, hey, can I lead the fireside chat? Because I have the best relationship. So the meeting's gonna be a little bit more enthusiastic because their kid's name, just more about them. But you don't realize every time you're doing that, number one, you get more comfortable but by being out there, but also your pitch is becoming a lot easier because more senior individuals in the company are seeing that you have multiple talents, not just being the practitioner for your particular program, but more so an influencer for the company. And the happier you are and the more successful you are, that means the company is going to be successful. So you have to know how to pitch that. And I wouldn't say like, hey, go full force saying, put me on the user conference as the keynote speaker, but I would say start small. Like if you're the person that's running all of the testimonials and the case studies, I would say have a little segment where maybe you're behind the scenes at Anaplan in 2006 2016, we had a big user conference in San Francisco, and I pitched that we did all of the case studies, the videos we bought it was at the top, the Fairmont suite. And so we had about 16 customers, and we also got 16 videos. So we were done with our content for the whole year. But based on that idea of pitching it, the leadership loved it. And I said, well, hey, can I do the interviews? Since I have the relationship with them. And so those interviews allowed credibility to see that I was more than just the behind the scenes person, but instead could actually give great interviews and amplify opportunities. That led to other opportunities. So I think that start small with your pitch. And before you know it, you're getting buy-in from all the right leaders, and that can lead to other doors to where you can externally start posting things with webinars and posting things of association with other companies. And I would say, again, the bigger the company, they want to make sure that you can actually stand your ground externally. So when they start seeing that internally, it's so easy to just get that signed off versus someone that might be holding you back a little bit because they don't know your capabilities. So I think that this is why pitching is so important.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree 100% as well. I mean, I've been able to, and I think it comes back to like a repetition a little bit to it. And I mean, a good example, like I'm heading to B2B MX this weekend for next week for a marketing conference. And so I'm speaking on a panel. And again, like it was just through like internal stuff and external stuff that they saw, and like I got asked to do, and it was great. Now I get a free trip out to Arizona and get to network with a bunch of cool marketers and create awesome content. And so I think it comes back to like just not being afraid to pitch yourself as well. Like pitching, even like pitching this whole idea of like this creator studio that we're building. I mean, it's never been done before. There's no playbook for it, but I think like the vision of the way people buy today has changed, and it's putting people first. And like, I just, pitched the idea, and ultimately it turned into a role. And here we are, a couple months later, and we'll see what happens as we progress the program out the rest of this year.
So I think that might be it. Any like key questions? This is more so relationship building. I think this taps into, Nick, what you were talking about with your strategy. I think personally for me, I always am very radio kind of tunnel vision when I'm thinking about who I need to create a relationship with whenever I start a new company or a new job, or even if I'm advising. I want to make sure that the programs that I'm doing for customer marketing or customer advocacy, whatever it is, it has the right eyes on it. So I have to think early on who's going to be my champion, who's going to be my executive sponsor, but also who's going to be like my colleagues that my success is their success. It's important because as you're building those relationships, I'll even take it back to what Nick said about people amplifying and commenting on your social media. If you're working with great colleagues that admire what you're doing, and also you're in like a partnership with them, that's also additional fans that you have on LinkedIn that's going to amplify your story, that's going to want to push you. And then I think also from a champion perspective, that might be your manager, or it might be, 2 levels up. But really trying to identify them is so crucial ahead of time, because you don't want to, get halfway through. I've seen this happen many a times where people think their program is so special, but they didn't talk to the right people. So no one actually understands why that program exists, or they think someone else is doing that program. So starting off early enough to where someone's going to talk about you in a room that you're not invited in is so crucial, and someone that's going to, give you a thumbs up on your post is so crucial. It's small, but you don't realize how long term that's going to affect you. And then positioning yourself, social tips, goals, etc. But that's pretty much the layout. Nick, do you want to add anything else to that slide?
No, yeah, you nailed it 100%.
Yeah.
Great. So we have, I think, 5 last minutes. If anybody wants to ask questions from the audience, feel free. I think, again, it's a great framework. You both have built in a very structured process. It took you a couple of years, but you've, like Nick said, it's you've been adamant at it and consistent and kind of try different things, whether it's podcasts or posts or, different angles of it. So because it is trial and error also. And that some posts, like you mentioned, Kalina, would work better than others. That's part of life. And I see a lot of people now doing these challenges of, hey, 31 month for a whole month, I'm going to post one day, like I'm going to post every day. Like, what do you think about those challenges? Like where people kind of say, okay, I'm doing this and just for a month and trying something.
I think it's okay to be experimental, but I think it's coming back to like what the foundational aspects of what you're trying to do are. Like there's things that I try. I mean, I guess different mediums or formats of like delivering certain types of content. Carousels is something that I've been trying on LinkedIn lately, and it's like it's like a way to deliver information that's a little bit different. But sometimes those do really well, but ultimately it's still coming back to like what that foundation of like what I typically talk about. And I don't try to stray like too much from that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Great. So I don't think we have any additional questions from everybody. So thank you so much, Nick and Kalina, for sharing everything. We wish everybody good luck and a great 2023. We can still say that.
You should pop up the list for the top 100 and how can people get involved in that if they didn't know anything about it this year?
Yeah, I think I don't know if people here don't know everything about it. But I mean, yeah, we'll share by email, I think, as follow-up, the link to the list and the page explaining what the Top 100 program is, and how they could get involved for 2023, which will be announced in 2024. And hopefully maybe some of the participants here will really be double down on their building their personal brand, and we'll see them in that list next year.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.